leave that.
All right, we've reached the point of the hour. I declare the meeting open and thank all for attendance. Item 2, I don't think there's any need to introduce ourselves, and we do have an apology at item 3 for Alderman Guanberto. I don't need to go over meeting procedures, I'm sure, as we're well aware of those. Item 5, confirmation of minutes of the 2015 AGM. Alderman Campbell, seconded Alderman Hume. Any discussion? Put the motion, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 6 is the annual report, and with the leave of the meeting, I'd like to move that the report be taken as read from the annual report. Thank you. Alderman Chong, seconded Alderman Pearce. Are there any questions on the Mayor's message? Okay, so put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 6, Part B, is the financial report. Mr. Barter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the overview of the 15-16 financial statements. The accounts were lodged within the 45-day statutory time frame. The audit was undertaken by the Tas Audit Office itself, and the audit certificate, unqualified, was issued on the 20th of September 2016. There were no major changes to accounting policies. There was a full revaluation of road assets as part of our normal revaluation cycle of assets. Probably the most significant change to accounting was the early adoption of standard AAS 124, which is disclosure of related party transactions, which is included in the financial report and audited. Turning to the income statement on page 51, the operating result was an accounting surplus of 14.6 million. The primary drivers of that were income. Grants Commission was actually lower for the 15-16 financial year due to a prepayment the prior year, and so that was reduced accordingly in the 15-16 year. There was a special grant for Kangaroo Bay of $2.1 million. There was an additional Roads to Recovery grant totalling $1.37 million. And also a contribution of assets of 8.4 million, which come from subdivision activity and so on, compared to 4.9 million the prior year. Expenses were unextraordinary and generally in budget. The underlying operating result was 1.8 million. That was slightly down on prior years. It was affected by expensing 1.1 million of capital projects that have been approved as capital by the council, but for accounting purposes we had to recognise as recurrent, and also about $500,000 combined reduced income earnings and also disposal of infrastructure assets, writing off roads that we'd resealed and so on. Excluding abnormal items, the operating result was quite consistent with the revised draft 10-year financial management plan. Balance sheet on page 52 of the annual report. There was a 2.6 million increase in cash, which was primarily driven by our recurrent cash surplus and also the timing of capital expenditure projects. The roads revaluation resulted in a minor increment of 2.2 million. Other infrastructure assets were stable, and councils holding minimal debt of about $370,000. Should have been 0.37 of a million, Mr. Mayor. Cash flow statement on page 54 reflects the change in cash, and also I note that CapEx, cash payments for capital projects increased by $1.3 million, which basically reflects the increasing size and effort of major project work. Just quickly, the financial ratios which are included at the back of the financial statements, and I believe these will also be reported in the forthcoming Auditor General report to Parliament. Our net financial liabilities ratio was very strong and remains unchanged from the prior year. The underlying surplus ratio is also strong. As I said, that's varied from the upward trend of previous years due to the couple of matters I mentioned. It's also consistent with the draft 10-year plan. The asset consumption ratios, stormwater and buildings are close to or above benchmark. Roads is below benchmark, however that's consistent with the asset management plans that have been approved by Council and discussed in detail with Aldermen. The asset renewal funding ratio, which is an important indicator because that's the one that indicates your financial capacity to meet your future infrastructure renewal, that's above benchmark, and that certainly demonstrates that Council has the forward financial capacity to maintain its infrastructure as it needs to. And the asset sustainability ratio is below benchmark, but that's again consistent with the asset management plan and your 10-year plans, which predicate a physical effort of about 80% of depreciation expense to be spent over the coming 10 years. That just purely reflects where we are in the asset renewal life cycle. And in terms of the audit management letter which was provided to us, there were no issues raised by the TAS Audit Office. So that's my report, Mr Mayor.
Are there any questions for the Corporate Treasurer, please? Mr Alderman James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Barter, what's the extent of the transfer of funds into any of the Council reserves during the year, please?
So those are all disclosed in a note to the accounts. Just have to find that particular note. That's on page 78 of the annual report. There are probably about 10 reserves there which are detailed. I can go through them in detail if you wish. I'm not sure if there's a...
Just the total amount that's actually gone.
I'll just have to see if there's a consolidated figure for that. I don't have a consolidated figure. I can transferred from surplus approximately. There was $11 million went into the infrastructure renewal reserve. Is the primary one. From there, the general reserve 400,000. Car parking reserve 116,000, public open space 243,000. The rest are fairly minor amounts.
Owns, could you just explain to Council the extent of borrowings, in particular the copy during the year? Council borrowings or copying borrowings? They're not, the copying borrowings aren't the subject of this report. I don't have copying details with me because that's a separate entity. What about the actual borrowings that Council required during the year? Council didn't undertake any borrowings during the year. As I said in my report, the outstanding debt the Council owes at the year end was about $370,000. Yep. Also, the consultants bill for the year, please, Mr Barter. Which consultants? Well, the consultant, what we pay the consultants. Consultants generally. I have...
Alderman James, I think consultancy can be interpreted in many ways. For example, if our engineering staff go out and employ a engineer to design, for example, or manage a project, are you including that in the general consultancy framework, or is it something more specific? The only reason I ask is because this has been an issue that's come up in terms of how you interpret the word consultancy.
Well, I assume, Mr Mayor, that there is an amount that appears in the report. Doesn't, then it must be spread across each of those 8 partners within Council. So there isn't any bottom line figure, Mr Barter, that you can tell us or tell me that there has been.
I'll answer that. So we could aggregate an amount, but it's not identified separately in the annual report, and because it would need to be researched and aggregated, I can't quote the number off the top of my head.
You take it on notice, certainly. Any other questions on the annual report? In that case, the recommendation, thank you Mr Barter, the recommendation is that 2015-16 annual report be adopted. I've got some move and second. Alderman Thurley, thank you. Alderman Pearce, I think. Any further debate? Motion is as recommended. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7, report on activities and achievements of council committees and authorities. Alderman McFarlane.
I'd like to table the annual report from Cycling South, minutes of the last AGM, and a copy of the last e-news, which has a number of links in it that I think aldermen would find interesting across the state. And I'm going to start sending them out to aldermen during the year because just as a information newsletter, they cover a whole range of activities across Hobart and the state. So I recommend the annual report for Cycling South.
Thank you. Noted the tabling, and it is, if it's convenient, to be able to table them also at an ordinary council meeting as well. You have that option.
I'll do them again in a minute.
Does that mean you've just untabled them?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Item 8, there's no motion, no matters on notice. Moving through to item 9, questions on notice. General Manager.
Yes, Mr Mayor, there's 4 questions on notice that were received from Mr D. Griggs of Brisbane Vale. They're printed in your agenda there, and I'll perhaps just provide a response to them. In response to question 1, the irrigation system has been updated as promised. However, when the upgraded system has been operational, it has been subject to increasing acts of vandalism, namely having the heads of the sprinklers knocked off or kicked off during the night when the system was running. So it's currently out of operation at the moment. We're trying to ascertain the best way of getting it, of maintaining it without it being vandalised. The annual question 2, the annual hard waste for collection for 2016 has just been completed. Council will review the operation of the collection as part of its deliberations for the 2017-2018 annual plan. The third point, the issue of installing a contact number and identifier unique to the facility is a good idea and will be implemented progressively as funds allow. Fourthly, Council's traffic engineer identified this intersection for treatment. The treatment involves an extension of the existing curb on Lantana Road, the installation of a small traffic island and the realignment of the intersection into a T-intersection. These works will provide definition to the travel lanes and prevent corner cutting. The estimated cost of the project is $30,000 and has been included in the preliminary 2017-2018 Capital Works Program and will be subject to consideration by Council as part of the 2017-2018 budget.
I'll take it. You're right to Mr Griggs advising them?
We will, yes.
Okay, there being no further matters on notice, there's an item here, questions without notice. Does that include for the Alderman or is that intended for members of the public?
It's generally intended for members of the public, Mr Mayor,
Oh, we're right on that one.
but I'm sure you can have questions without notice from the Alderman if you like.
If there are any, I guess we can entertain them or we can do it in the formal council meeting that follows tonight.
While we're on that, can I just go back to that question on notice and just I assume that in the GM's response to Mr Griggs at item 2, he will probably say yea or nay to the reinstatement of the booking system because he's quite clear when he mentions that he wants to see the reinstatement of the booking system.
That'll be a matter for us to determine when we review the effectiveness of the hard waste collection system. So we won't be able to answer that until Council comes to a conclusion.
So can it be incorporated in the response to him to say that the reinstatement of the system will be subject to, rather than what I thought was being said is that
we can certainly point
the hard waste collection will be reviewed at the appropriate time. You know, can we actually mention that the reinstatement will be our consideration and will be discussed as part and parcel of that?
Certainly. Thank you. Any other questions? In that case, I'll declare the AGM closed and